Today we're going to be going over a question that we get very often, and it's what can I feed my worms and what can't I feed my worms? So starting off with the list of things that they really like are fruits, vegetables and vegetable waste, squash and pumpkin, eggshells, coffee grounds, tea bags and coffee filters. So whenever you have coffee in the morning, you can just throw the coffee grounds along with the filter straight into the bin. Aged lawn clippings and dry leaves. The one thing you have to watch for with the lawn clippings though is make sure that they are aged and done breaking down. That way you're not heating up your bin. Some more examples of the vegetable scraps that you can give your worms include lettuce, carrot tops, broccoli stalks, cucumber peels, spinach, kale and other leafy greens, zucchini, raw and cooked potato scraps. Some of the fan favorites that our worms just absolutely love are bananas, watermelon, and avocado. So what are some of the food groups that you want to try to avoid? You want to avoid salty foods, acidic fruit or citrus fruit and citrus peels, any spicy foods, oils and oily food high in fat, foods with any preservatives. So basically, if it's not real food, if it's got added sugars or added preservatives, you want to avoid those. Onions and garlic, meat, bones, and dairy products. And then non-foods you want to avoid include plastic, sawdust, and rubberish materials. So that's a pretty basic list for what you're wanting to feed your worms and what you're not wanting to feed your worms. But there are some additional things you want to keep in mind when feeding your worms. So the next thing is, how much should I feed my worms, or how often should I feed my worms? And this all kind of depends on how big of a bin and how many worms you have. A red wiggler worm will typically eat roughly half of its body weight in food per day. So let's say you have 1,000 worms. 1,000 red wiggler worms roughly weigh about 1 pound. So that means they're going to be eating about half a pound of food per day. So you want to give your worms about 2 to 3 days worth of food, and that's it. You don't want to overfeed them. So this is kind of a guessing game at first, but you can kind of test it out, see how long it takes them to eat the food that you've given them, and go from there. So the reason you don't want to go more than that is if the food is sitting in your bin for too long, it's going to start rotting down and getting real stinky, and that's going to cause unwanted pests and other things getting into your bin, and it's also going to create an unhealthy environment for your worms that are in there. Feeding your worms is also a balancing act between greens and browns, and that's the material that you're putting in there. So brown material includes things like dried leaves or cardboard and newspaper, whereas greens are more of your kitchen scraps. The brown material is usually thought of more as what their bedding material is made of, whereas the greens you think of more as what they're actually eating every day. But the worms will eat about 50-50 browns to food scraps. So the cardboard and compost and different things like that that you're putting into your bin for bedding, they're actually going to eat and break that down as well as the greens. When putting in both browns and green material, the thing you have to watch out for is causing heat. So the difference between a worm bin and a compost pile like you typically have outside is that the compost pile outside, your goal is to heat that up. And that heat is what breaks down the material that you're throwing in there. We don't want that in a worm bin. In a worm bin, we just want the worms to do all the work, to eat all the material, to get all of that broken down. And if you get the worm bin heating up, that's going to cause more problems with your worm bin, and your worms are potentially going to try to escape or even die. Hope you guys found the video helpful. If you did, hit that like button. And if you have any questions about our worms, worm castings, or worm tea, leave a comment down below and we'll try to get those answered for you in one of our next videos. See you guys next time.